a long story, but it's a fun story. A saintly man and a perfect one both resided on the outskirts of a very beautiful city. Though they lived several miles apart. One day it came to the attention of these two households that a visiting prince desired to pay his respects to the most revered spiritual leader in that province. And he wanted to give a small fortune to the man of that household to help further God's work. As there had been for many years some question amongst the population who in fact was the most spiritual of these two households, the saintly man or the perfect one, the prince devised something of a contest, as he only had time to visit one of these people. The prince, who wanted to give this small fortune to further God's work, sent out word. And that message said, in 3 days, I would like to meet with, in my quarters, the chief representative of each of these two renowned religious leaders. And after questioning their chief spokesperson, I'll question them extensively, I and my ministers will determine who in fact of their teachers is closer to God. And thus, who'll get this big bounty? Well, the saint, having received this news, met with all of his close advisors. The council of advisors discussed the situation. They discussed it for hours. They explored every nuance. And they considered how much gold this could mean. They were excited. This could mean a lot of money to further the work of God. Then the council decided, yes, it's a clear majority. There's no one we should send but Ramju. Ramju is the one. Ramju was chosen. Ramju. Ramju was strikingly handsome. He's a very handsome man. He was a great hunter. He was a legendary warrior. He was a renowned artist. He could paint beautiful images. And a poet beyond compare. His intellect, it was superb. And he could speak 20, did you hear me? 20 different languages. This was a great man. And he was descended from royal blood himself. His great aunt was a queen. And someone in the saints' camp also knew that this prince enjoyed the intimate company of men as well as women. Yes, they all nodded. Yes, Ramju. Ramju is the one we should send. He's the one. He's the right choice. Well, several miles away lived the one they called the perfect one. Upon receiving the news from the prince, he immediately called for Yazamin. Yazamin. No consultation was needed by anyone. He knew. Yazamin. Yazamin was a servant woman in the master's household. She was nearly 80. She was a famous old hag. She'd worked for the master all her life. Yazamin. She's the one. She worked for him since she was a child. How come? Because nobody else would hire her. Only the perfect one. Now, Yasmin was also completely mad. Well, perhaps God mad. But she was mad. Nevertheless, her qualifications for this essential, delicate diplomacy was exact, and the perfect one knew. Yasmin had not combed her hair or bathed for months. She mostly muttered unintelligible sounds in her own secret language. And only the master knew that secret language. And she often made obscene gestures while exposing her private parts. Yasmin, she's the one. She's the one, the perfect one, knew is the right one to send. Oh, Yasmin, she compulsively picked her nose. And she threw those boogers with astounding accuracy. Ah, yes, Yasmin. No one had ever known her to go for 5 minutes without loudly farting at least 4 times. And she was psychic, too. She was psychic. And she would probably start beating the prince if she saw with her inner eye that he had ever gone too far romantically with his camels. Yasmin, the perfect one, knew. Yasmin, she's the one. She was the right choice for the envoy to meet the prince. Oh, Yasmin. Yeah. Well, Yasmin was the right choice, and she agreed with a deep, enlightened laugh to add to her already majestic and sublimely free beingness. She agreed to wear a crown of 3 live chickens that she would proudly drape over her head come the appointed time with His Royal Highness. The day of the prince came. The 2 envoys entered the prince's quarters, but were kept separate and did not even see one another. Ramju went in first, the princely one, in all of his elegance. And from behind a door, Yasmin could hear singing and lively talk that went on for 2 hours. Yasmin heard they were having a wonderful time there. And she knew what was happening. The prince was falling in love with his new guest. Yasmin knew. Then, Yasmin was brought in. And the prince couldn't believe his eyes when he saw her. He felt tremendously insulted and even became a bit terrified when, in fact, Yasmin, being able to see into the prince's past, she started shouting things that even he could understand. She was shouting things about that one regrettable night in the desert with that young, gorgeous camel. She even hit the prince with 2 gigantic boogers from 20 feet away. It bounced off his head, and those boogers fell right into his tea. She was a good aim, Yasmin. Yasmin was ordered and beaten and thrown out. She returned to the master's house ecstatic. And she's never been happier since. Well, that night, the prince couldn't sleep. But finally he dozed off for a few minutes, just before dawn. And during this short sleep, he had a dream. The Prophet Muhammad was seated on a magnificent white horse. And behind the Prophet, sat a man smiling wonderfully at the prince. And then he said, "Why did you beat my dear Yasmin? She only spoke the truth to you." The prince bolted awake. He sat up in bed, trembling with sweat. He called for his horse to be saddled, and with 10 of his soldiers, he rode right then to the saintly man's house, pleading to see him. Upon seeing this man and realizing he was not the person in his dream, he then dismissed his soldiers, and taking off his shoes, weeping, he began to walk to the perfect one's house. And then our storyteller completes the story. Our storyteller is Hafiz. Hafiz completes the story and says, "Dear ones, use your own storytelling abilities. Use your own imagination to end this tale in a way that will most uplift your heart." So who are you? Are you Yasemin? Or are you Ramju? Can you toss those boogers at 20 feet and hit your target? Can you continue your contemplation and hit the mark? Or are you Ramju, elegant, tell wonderful stories?
Stop looking at me.
I'll boogie you.
Booger or bugger?
Definitely not bugger.
Yeah. I love that story, huh? Great story from Hafiz. Hafiz is just incredible. I mean, I like his friend, Rumi, but Hafiz always just hits the mark for me. And I'm going to read one of Hafiz's other poems. And after that, I'm going to read the guy that I consider the reincarnation of Hafiz, my friend Joseph.
When did he pass?
Hafiz, you mean when did he pass through here? Because he came by a week or so ago. Hafiz lived, I think, about 1,000 years ago in Persia.
It's like he's written it for today, though.
Well, what's fascinating is Daniel Ladinsky, who's the guy whose interpretations or renderings that I love and read. Daniel Ladinsky has, done several of Hafiz's, several books of Hafiz's poems, and Daniel Ladinsky is part of this whole Western spiritual movement. He studied with Meher Baba, and Meher Baba was Persian, I think. Maybe not Persian.
Yeah.
Was he Persian?
Yeah.
So he knew of him, and he turned Daniel Ladinsky onto it, and Daniel Ladinsky's been doing his poems. So they're renditions, because I could read some scholar from a university that's not quite the same. So that's why it resonates so much with us.